I'm Brianna.
And I'm Elise. We're sisters. And this is Chit-Chat and Cheers. Well, shall we cheers?
Yes.
What are you drinking?
I am drinking a cab. It's from Cooper's Hawk. It's like Heaven Horse Hill, I think was the one. So cheers.
Well, I am drinking Hopadillo IPA,
Ching.
not a champagne this evening.
I was like, look at you. Drinking something different.
Yes. It's rather... I usually like IPAs that are a little bit more citrusy, and this one isn't, but it's I think it's a Texas-based brewery, and so they have it everywhere here.
Nice.
Yeah, brewed in Texas.
Do you like wheat beers?
I do. I like. I feel like I don't know. I feel like when I drink anything that doesn't have like a lot of hop in it, it's like, why are you wasting the calories on something that's not like killing your taste buds almost? So I think that's why I like IPAs. But I like Blue Moon. I think Blue Moon's good.
You mentioned coming up in February.
Yeah, I would love to do that. We'll see. I know we had planned to go to Hawaii in March, and that might be on hold for right now. So we'll see. There's a lot up in the air, but
yes, indeed,
I would love that. I do have $1,800 in credit from American Airlines, though, so it's the only time that Sloan getting sick in the bathroom prior to a flight was actually advantageous. So it has happened more than once, and on flights. And it's not that she's like sick; it's that she gets so anxious that she won't be able to go to the bathroom when she wants to go to the bathroom, that she makes herself have to go to the bathroom, or she'll throw up. So.
Is she anxious about, like, does she get nervous from like the flight, like the turbulence and stuff, or she just doesn't like the idea of not being able to go to the bathroom?
That one. When you gotta go, you gotta go. It's just not like every time we even stop at the gas station this time, I'm like, sis, do you need to go to the bathroom? No, but I'm gonna try. Well, okay.
Good on her. Oh my gosh, the one and only time I've ever been sick on an airplane. We were coming back from a wedding in Minnesota, and it was like a smash and grab. We flew in like the day was the day of? It might have been the morning of. We flew in and then had the wedding, and then we flew out the next day at we left at like 6 a.m. So we had to like get up at like 4. So we had like almost no sleep. I don't know. I must have just been hungover. I must have been. I didn't feel hungover like when I woke up, but like, oh my gosh, we got to the airport and I'm just feeling more and more sick. We finally get on the flight and it's feeling like more and more iffy. We go to taxi and we literally are like probably like 200 feet off the ground, like taking off. And I'm like, I gotta get up. So I stand up and start like running to the bathroom. And the stewardess is like yelling. She's like, "Bam, sit down." I'm like, look, you can either let me go to the bathroom and throw up in here, or I can throw up at my seat and you can clean it up. Which of these would you like to do? And she's like, go ahead. Like, thanks.
Where's the barf bag? What do you need it?
Oh my gosh. Oh my God, that was awful. That was such a bad flight.
I have a barf bag. I don't know where I got it. It must have been a hospital somewhere I worked at along the lines. But Sloan and Blair have gotten sick enough times in the car that this trip I packed it, because in the past it's been like either they throw up all over themselves, or I'm like, here's a plastic bag here. Here's like a McDonald's carton from breakfast this morning. And so this time she saw me and I packed it where I can reach it quickly in my door. And she was like, smart, mommy.
Smart.
Like she literally like tried to wink and pointed at me. And I was like,
Oh my gosh. That just makes me think my kids, I don't know what we were talking about, but I winked at them and I was like, oh, can you guys wink? And just seeing both of them just be like, yeah, for our audio only listeners.
You have to have the mouth wide open while they do it.
Yes, for audio only listeners, we're mouths agape, blinking very like intently at each other. Aggressively. I'm like, it's a good try, buddy. Oh my gosh. I have 2 things I wanted to tell you.
Real quick though, in the line of winking, have your kids learned to snap yet?
No.
Just wait. Blair learned to snap before Sloan, and it was a big deal. And Sloan would practice constantly. And now we can all snap. Chewing gum is the next thing. Or blowing bubbles.
Blowing bubbles. That I remember practicing that. Yes.
Uncle Eric taught me.
You learned how to do it before me, and I remember being so jealous and practicing because I wanted to be able to blow bubbles. And I would like, I think the problem was I was trying to use like spearmint gum that's like not meant to blow bubbles, and so I'm like trying to like push my tongue out through it. Yeah, and it just goes like flying out of my mouth. It's not a good look. At least it didn't hit anybody.
All right, what did you want to talk about?
Oh, so before we get to our topic for today, um, so I had a couple of funny things that happened throughout the week that I wanted to tell you about. Um, so I think you kind of got like a little bit of this because in our group chat I mentioned it sort of very like high level, but I'm upstairs folding laundry and I can hear some sort of a ruckus happening
A
downstairs.
ruckus.
There's sounds coming around. It sounds like something is being destroyed, and there's like manic laughter from both the kids. I can hear them like as they're like running around the house. And then I have this like internal debate of, do I go downstairs because clearly they're doing something they shouldn't be doing. They're being really rowdy, and so they're probably destroying something, and put a stop to that, or do I just let them be and finish what I'm doing because they're distracted and I
And
can actually
happy.
and happy and can fold laundry in peace. And so I texted our group chat and they unanimously said, leave them alone. Just do what you
Fold your
want to
laundry.
do. Fold your laundry in peace. And so I finish up and go downstairs. Luke had drawn all over his face with a marker. So that was
Good look for him.
lovely. I'm like, oh no.
Please tell me it was magic marker.
It was not magic marker, but it was like off-brand washable, quote
So it
unquote,
wasn't like dry
markers.
erase or permanent.
No, it was not, thankfully. But it did not come off. So he had quite the
A
decoration.
moustache. A moustache.
A mustache. She had quite the decoration. So that was one. And then the other I wanted to tell you about. So one of our uh leading into the holiday traditions with my husband's family is the Friday after Thanksgiving. We would go when it was just adults and then like one grandchild, we would go and actually cut down a Christmas tree and then go back to um grandma and grandpa's house, put the tree up, and then we would make homemade pizzas together. That's since evolved since COVID and having lots of little kids just makes it a little bit difficult. So we don't do the cutting the tree down part anymore, but we still go over and make homemade pizzas all together. So we were doing that on Friday. Because this is being recorded post Thanksgiving. So happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Turkey Day.
Happy late Turkey Day.
Gobble,
We
gobble.
gobble gobble indeed. We were over there making pizzas and Nora does not like pizza, but she really wanted to be involved. So she was like, "Mommy, can I make your pizza so that I can get to make it, but then you eat it?" I'm like, "Yeah, love that. That's perfect." And so she's rolling out the dough and like putting the sauce on, the toppings, and I am within an inch of my life having to control myself to not like grab them out of our hands and be like, let me do it. Because she is just like making this monstrosity of a pizza that like, I really struggle. Like, I don't know if it's like I want to control the fun or the mess is what bothers me, but like, it's like, it really bothers me that it's not done just so. And I'm usually not a type A person. I feel like type B, like laid back, whatever, go with the flow, except for very specific things
If you
when it
want
comes
more
to like,
information about that, please see our episode on enneagrams.
yes, exactly.
Enneagrams, however you say it.
Enneagrams. But for whatever reason, this was like something that was like really triggering me. And I was like scratching my eyeballs out, like, okay, okay, that's enough sauce. That's enough sauce. And and then B, I knew I was gonna have to eat it at the end. So I'm like, this is
Not what I would choose
gross.
for myself. Not on the menu.
It's just like trying to bake with a little kid is,
Do you know what I have discovered? You know how mom used to make Knox blocks?
yeah.
Make Knox blocks, but put them in like a 9 by, what is that? 9 by 7?
9 by 13.
Yeah, that one. Pan. And then I get the Christmas cookie cutters out and they just like do Christmas cookies on the Knox blocks. So much less mess. And then
Oh
like all
yeah,
this,
yeah.
we put them on a plate, we leave them in the fridge, and that's like their dessert for a few days. It's probably healthier too than cookies and pudding and whatnot. And then I just throw the scraps away and the pan cleans up real easy. So,
I should do that. That's a good idea, actually.
and they love it.
Yeah.
They're like, they'll ask for it because it's like Jello and they can like jiggle them around but they still can do the cookie cutters.
Pretty sure Luke would probably throw the gel because it's the same consistency as like those like sticky hands,
Oh
and he
yeah.
loves like flinging those against the walls. Pretty sure we
We
would
have
end
a
up
rule
with
that we
Jello
no
against the
longer
wall.
allowed to throw things after Sticky Gecko and Bluey. And it's like, that's where that comes from. It leaves stains on your ceiling.
Yeah, they do.
No,
Those like
we're
sticky
not.
hands. Yeah.
We're not doing that. No.
Oh my gosh, the way our house has been beat to hell.
I think
between
that
like
too.
stuff like them like running to the walls, the geckos. When we first moved in, I don't think we even had Luke yet. Yeah, it was just Nora. We have this like big basket that we put the blankets in, and Luke or Chris had that on the floor, put Nora in it when she was like really little, and was like pushing her around the little like circuit that we have in our house. And then I come downstairs and I'm like, that has like a nail or something sticking out of it, because we've got like a line that's like circling around our
We have a
downstairs
basket
where it
like
was
that too that used to have our blankets in
scratching.
it, and I saw that, and so now it's on the tile and the shoes go in it. Because I was like, that was an expensive basket. We're not throwing it away, but it's not going on the wood anymore. They were playing some game this weekend where they sat in a laundry basket and were scooting each other around the hardwoods. It's like, guys, that goes in the kitchen on the tile or on the carpet. We're not doing that on the hardwood. So
Like,
sorry.
no, no. Yeah, when we part of me like I wish we were in a bigger place, like our forever home. Um, but the other half of me is like kind of glad that we're not in that right now in this season of life where they are really rough on stuff, because I'm like, we're gonna have to put a new coat of paint on everything, redo the
Yeah.
floors, probably move out, but I
Well,
don't
and you
know.
like I love our kitchen, but like I would never do white cabinets again. Like it looks gorgeous, but they get disgusting with small children, like the bottom
Yeah.
ones. And then like a bunch of the doors in our home like are painted navy blue, and we have like really pretty gray walls, and it looks gorgeous. But the door into the playroom, it just looks like there's handprints and splatters of glue and paint and all the things. And I'm just like, oh Lord, if we ever have to move and sell this house, it's going to be so expensive to get it to the point where it needs to be.
Oh man. Yeah, I mean, if we are, I would love to build a house for our next place if
That's what
we're
I'd like
able
to do too.
to do that. Chris and I have both said that we would be interested in, and obviously we'd have to be invited, but just putting our stuff in storage and moving in with his parents, and then selling the house, like
Yeah.
just stage it and sell it, while we figure out and work on building, because I'm just like, I don't have any desire to be living in a house while I'm trying to sell it. And I've been very spoiled. The first place that Chris and I owned together was the condo downtown Chicago, and it went through a process called deconversion, where it was a big building with individual condos that were all owned individually, and then a real estate developer came and decided they wanted to turn the whole building into apartments, and so they bought the whole building. It bought everyone out, and so not only did we not have to list it or show it, but they paid a premium, because obviously most people weren't looking to sell. We were kind of within a year we're going to look to sell, so we really lucked out in terms of not only timing, but we didn't have to show it, and then we got a premium for the condo. So
Your laundry room also caught on fire in that building.
that's
Like,
true.
let's be clear. It wasn't exactly a gem.
That's true. It was a great Chris and I call it our love nest, because it was just like, it was a great place for us to start out. It was really great because I was working at Goldman at the time. He was doing his residency. We were both working crazy long hours. We weren't there that often. But it was an interesting place because it was
Can we talk about the
uh
deck? The deck was amazing.
the deck was the best part for sure. But so it was a technically a 2-bed, 2-bath apartment, but it was very, very small. So for example, our bedroom, we had a king size bed in there, and then about, oh, I don't know, somewhere between 12 and 18 inches on all sides of the bed before you hit the wall, that you could kind of like shimmy around the bed. And that's all that would fit in there. Like no side tables, nothing. But none of the walls went to the ceiling, and there were no
Oh,
doors
yeah. I
on any
forgot
of the
about
rooms
that.
except for the bathrooms. The bathrooms did have doors, but that's because the back bedroom did not have a window in it. And
You had
for
to be able
technically
to
for,
have a egress.
well, yeah, it had to have window light access to be able to consider it a bedroom. And so the way they got around that was they didn't put the walls all the way up to the ceiling, so the window light technically could get over top of the wall. So between that and then yes, our we had a stacked washer and dryer, and I was doing laundry, and the dryer, was it the dryer? I think it was actually the washing machine. The washing machine sparked and then caught on fire when I was like running it. And this happened maybe like a week or two after I don't know if you remember that big apartment fire that happened in the UK where a bunch of people died. Um, it was probably 2016, 2017, somewhere around there. There was a similar situation where a apartment unit caught on fire. The building was not equipped to handle a fire, and a bunch of people lost their lives. So that had happened like a week or two prior to this. And so my washing machine is on fire, like It's very small fire, but on fire.
It was
And
going
so
up the wall. It's not
I
a
mean, I
small
feel
fire, Brianna. It's a fire.
I've actually had a couple house fires now that I think about it, because their house in Boston caught on fire too, but
I have never had this problem.
that was not my fault. So anyway,
That's what I say every time I wreck a car. It wasn't my fault.
it wasn't my fault. I panicked a little bit and I called 911. And so the like full on like 3 or 4 engine brigade came, and up come the firefighters in full uniform. They
Were they
can't use the
cute?
elevators. What?
Were they
I don't
cute?
know. They had their stuff on. I couldn't
Oh,
see.
rats.
Uh,
No ripped abs or
no, they sadly they did not show up half naked to fight an
rats.
actual
Totally ruining
fire.
all my visions of the fire department in Chicago.
But they can't use the elevator, so they're in full gear, and we lived on the 21st floor, so they had to walk up 21 flights to get
You're
up
a
there.
bad guy.
I
You're
am.
a
I
bad
felt so
guy.
bad. The whole building shut down. Like, they didn't have to evacuate the building, but I was like, "I am so sorry." I panicked and probably definitely overreacted by calling
Okay. Trading
911,
time
but
out though, I want to point out that my sister is a genius and she did not try to fight a fire extinguisher to put out an electrical fire. She found baking soda
yes, I did. That is
and
true.
she put it out herself. So, yes, thank you. Don't put
I don't
out
know.
electrical fires or oil fires with water, people. You will not do any good for anyone.
I don't know that it necessarily was because of me thinking about it. I don't think we had a fire extinguisher in the
That
house,
doesn't matter.
so
You did the right thing and you stopped the
thanks.
fire. And you made sure that the fire department was ready to respond because next time they may not be so lucky and that fire could be raging.
So, yes. So, I put the fire out after I had called 911, but I was terrified that there was, like, I don't even know what I thought was gonna happen, like, some sort of additional electrical spark in the wall was gonna happen. I don't know. And so up the firemen came, looked at it, and they're like, "Yeah, your washing machine's broken. Like, thanks for
Did you
calling."
ask them to take their tops off at that point? Because that's what I would
I
have done.
I
I'd have
should
been like,
have.
okay, anyone with a six pack is required legally. I have documentation from the state of Chicago right here, or the city of Chicago right here, that you're required to show me your six pack.
I pay for your
If
salary,
you
so
prefer to strip on the bar, that is acceptable.
that's just a wasted opportunity, honestly.
I've
Now that
been
I'm thinking
watching too
about it.
much Bad Moms Christmas. I'm sorry.
Did you
Yeah.
did you see the video that I sent you on TikTok about the 2 sisters who, like, rent the hotel room?
Yes, we should do
I
that if we lived closer.
I
It's
know. If we live
brilliant.
closer, so I saw this,
Or we
I
could
think
just
it was
rent
on
a
Instagram.
UPS pallet and we could do that and I could just mail it home. It's fine.
There you go. These
Yeah.
2 sisters, they go shopping on Black Friday, get, like, they had a lot of stuff, to be honest with you. They
Yeah,
had, like,
like what, 5 trips? 4 or
yeah,
5?
5 or 6 trips down to get it. But then they rent a hotel room together, and they drink wine, have dinner, and then spend the night in this hotel room together with sister bonding time, wrapping all their gifts, and then take them home. I'm like, "That is genius." I
That
actually
is
thought about,
genius.
uh, getting a storage unit, like, in one of those, like, inside ones, you know, where they
Uh-huh.
have, like, the ones that are inside. Like, getting that and be like, "I'm just gonna put all my Christmas gifts there and then go there and just, like, wrap so I can be left alone."
I literally just put the fear of death into my children that if they open my closet door, there might be a crocodile because so the story at our house is Conrad kept all the crocodiles and alligators away when he died. There's a very real possibility they could show up. And if you open mom's closet at any point without permission, there could be a crocodile in there.
At any second, you could be attacked by a crocodile. I'm not gonna lie, there has been at least twice where, I'm up in the morning doing stuff, Nora comes downstairs, and I happen to look over, and I'm like, "Oh, that's a Christmas gift that I accidentally left out on the table. I'm just gonna."
Hidden in plain sight.
There's been a couple times where they've been like, "What's that?" And I'm like, "Oh, that got delivered wrong. That's not ours. We gotta take it back to the mail station, the, post office to return it." Because
Take it to Whole Foods because that's where you return Amazon packages now.
yeah, so there's been several things that they think are actually theirs, but aren't. So I have to keep track of, like, which ones they've seen. I'm gonna have to think about that so that I don't do those from you know who.
But let's get to our topic.
Yes. What are we doing today?
We are talking about our birth stories, but
Not our birth stories, but our experience giving birth.
I mean, I could talk about my birth story. Mom has told it multiple times that I'm directionally challenged and high maintenance because I came out breech, but that's neither here nor there. But I also want to say I did like very minimal research about other birth related things prior
Oh, look
to
at you.
this.
I did 0.0 research for today.
Well, that's me usually. But I say minimal, I mean like I Googled it like for 20 minutes. It's fine. But I thought some other things that are like birth related are birthstones, Where does the origin of birth stories, like why is that a thing? And then push presents, like where did that all come from?
Yeah.
Right. And
Do you have all that
so,
information today?
yes. And by
Look
today,
at
like,
you. I'm
and
so excited.
like literally, I'm going to be reading Google from the 15 minutes before we started this. But anyway, birthstones actually, I thought it was really interesting because I think that's probably a very American Christian type thing. And it really has its origins there because the idea of birthstones thinks is back to the breastplate of Aaron, one of the religious folks in the Bible. And it was, he had 12 stones for the 12 tribes of Israel on his breastplate in battle.
Mm.
And so, it was so I just thought that was really interesting that that's where that kind of came from. And
Are they are they the same stones? Like,
that
they probably
I
don't
haven't
we
gotten, I
probably
didn't
don't
do
know.
that much research.
I feel like
But
usually the Bible isn't that specific.
but they say in the 8th and 9th centuries, each stone was associated with an apostle, and they kind of like associated that with a particular month. So like it was in the 8th and 9th centuries where that became a thing. And then by the 18th century, the tradition of wearing gemstones for the month of your birth became popular. And then in 1912, the National Association of Jewelers standardized it. And so
Oh,
there
okay.
are traditional and modern birthstones. So one of we'll get to push presents in a second, but my push present from John is Moonstone, which is a modern birthstone for my girls being born, but their traditional one would be Pearl. So I thought that was interesting, which is what my
Ooh, I
10-year
wanna know what
anniversary
my
was.
Oh, that's nice. You got one of
Yeah.
each. I
Yeah.
wanna know what my traditional versus modern one is, because I think I'm amethyst.
You're
Well,
June,
what
right?
yeah.
Amethyst
Well,
and Pearl are June because the girls
okay.
are June.
I was saying June
Moonstone
girls are
is
June.
one of the modern one. Yeah. So
Okay.
there's different, it depends on like where you look and what it is. But so I thought that was really interesting about birthstones. And we can do a whole nother episode diving more into this if we want to. And then I was thinking about like why do we talk about birth stories? Like basically uh, dating back to the day when women didn't really have a whole lot of education or rights, that was one way that they orally could communicate. It was something that they could all connect on, which I think is still very true today. It was a way that they passed medical traditions down. So, like
Mhm.
different things that worked in different situations for childbirth, like the birth story is how that kind of came out. And midwives actually were the people who perpetuated like birth stories becoming a tradition, is what I read in my very limited research.
That makes
Um,
sense, and I mean, in birth giving birth is such an interesting experience because it's at the same time
by
very
interesting, you
traumatic.
mean life altering.
Yeah, it's very traumatic, emotional, and, like, life-altering,
And
exciting, so it's, like
dangerous.
and dangerous. I mean,
And let's
obviously,
not
with
even
modern
get into the
medicine,
fact that the United States still has terrible rates when it comes to healthy births, but we're working on it.
it's crazy. But yeah,
I
it's,
also think
like
that data may be skewed, but that's just me.
you think so?
I mean, I have no idea actually, but I'm
I'm
just
just talking out my ass.
I'm just talking.
But no,
But
I think it's similar with anything that's, like, traumatic like that and, um, like, a milestone of your life, talking about it helps you process it and, like, sharing stories and comparing stories helps you, like,
well, I
through
also
that
think that
situation.
especially like in the hunter gatherer age, women were we it was very much a community that raised your children, and like
Mm.
talking about like how you had your child helped other women. They commiserated with you and like, oh, hers is way worse than mine. I should be nice to her, like that sort of thing. I think it's just a really interesting way, and it's something that John, he loves me and he loves our children, and he will listen to me talk about it all day long. But he's just like, I don't really want to hear those details. And women are like, tell me everything. How did you tear? What happened? Like,
I want the details, give me the
yeah.
juice.
Yeah. So, and then the last thing I was looking at was push presents because I think that's something that's really interestingly related to birth. And I think that like I'm actually wearing. I didn't even do it on purpose, but this is the push present Dad gave Mom when I was born.
Oh, yeah, does that have the little diamond in the side of it?
No, it's just the
Like, off to the
strawberry
center?
heart.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
But Dad gave this to Mom after I was born. And I don't think push presents were even like a real thing in American culture then, but they represent like, the journey of pregnancy and the sacrifices that
Mhm.
come with it. So, and like stretching, granted, like diamond rings, engagement rings were given to like women so that if a man broke it off, she had some sort of collateral because she was like no longer, high quality goods.
She was damaged goods.
Right. And so it was something that she could use to like, sustain herself. And it almost feels like push presents started in that way. It's like, oh, well, if I decide to leave you, even though you're pregnant with my kid, you at least have this diamond bracelet to pay, feed you to for a year. But
Your souvenir, your consolation prize.
yes. So
Absolutely.
whose are we starting with? Your first one, mine, or your second one?
Why don't we go chronologically? So I'll have you. Why don't you start?
So birth stories. So where do I
Yes.
start? Let's see. So John and I had agreed that we would try to have babies after. So he was a department head in the Navy, and we wanted babies when he got back from his first department head tour. However, we knew that it took some time to have babies, so we decided to start trying to have babies. Probably a couple months before he wanted to, but the first we started trying in September, and in October I took a pregnancy test, and it was negative, and I was a little bit disappointed. And he was like, "Babe, like we're not ready to be pregnant. Like we got to try for a few months." And I'm like, "You just want to try, sir."
I know
Um,
what this means. You just want to
yeah.
try.
But the next day I just didn't feel right. Like I was sick to my like I had like upset stomach, and I just like I'm just going to take another one, and it was positive. And it was like not a normal pregnancy test with like a positive or a negative. It was like literally a happy face. And I was just like, that's a little sketchy that not everyone's going to want a happy face.
I would say that's a very assuming that if positive pregnancy test is happy.
Yeah. So we took the pregnancy test, and I remember it was it was a Sunday morning, and John was laying in bed, and I came back from the bathroom, and I looked at him, and he goes, "What?" I go, "We're pregnant." He looked at me, and he goes, "First time." I was just like, this is not a Batman movie. It's not the Lego movie. First try. And so that was great. And then my husband was in the Navy when this all was occurring, and they were getting ready to go on deployment. And
And so are
so
you.
I was in the Navy too, but I wasn't getting ready to go. I was in the reserves. I wasn't getting ready to go on deployment. But I found out I was pregnant. And then like 3 weeks later, they were doing workups to get ready to go deploy. And so he was underway. He was gone for like 2 weeks, and I started bleeding. And I was just like really bummed. I was just like, oh, I'm probably miscarrying. Like something's wrong. And I'm in medicine, so I was just like, there's nothing anyone can do about it. Like, there's nothing to be done. I should just like not worry about it. But like, I couldn't quit worrying about it. And so my sister-in-law, who lived right near me at the time, was like, let's just go to the ER. Like, the hospital's right there. It's a military hospital. They'll take care of you. And so we went in, and I was that girl. I was like, I'm 5 weeks pregnant. I'm bleeding. Like, I just need to know if I need to worry about this or not. And they were like, okay, well, we need to
You're saying
do.
it like you're like it's such a oh, I'm such a pain. I'm like most people would be very concerned about
Well, I
that.
felt like a pain because I know that like logically there's nothing they could do. But I was like, okay, well, I want the most junior person to do my transvaginal ultrasound, which if you're having somebody stick something up there, that's like dangerous. But they were like, are you sure? We have a medical student here. And I was like, let him do it. That's fine. And so he goes in, and he's like, has this like transvaginal ultrasound. This like kid is like shaking, and he just goes, sir. And I was like, oh, Jesus Christ. It has like hair and teeth, and it's like a giant ball of cells, and it's terrible. And this child's going to have nightmares for the rest of his life. And the, whoever like the highest ranking resident at whatever at the place was like, oh, oh. And I was like getting more and more like, oh my God,
Can
like
someone tell me what's going
this is
on?
alien, like what is happening? And he goes like, well, ma'am, we need to do some further testing, but you're not miscarrying. There's two. And I just remember being like, John and I had a whole discussion previously that like he's like, you're not getting a minivan. We're gonna get an SUV. We're gonna be like those people. And I was like, if we have twins, I want a minivan. He was like, fine. And I was like,
Because John is a twin.
John is a
So there are
twin, yeah.
twins in the family.
Yeah. And he wanted me to be the cool mom. And I was like, oh my God, we have twins. And so I went through all this additional testing that night. Everything was fine. One of them had like implanted, had like a little bit of a blood sac underneath it, which that's what they were seeing was that blood from that sac draining while she fully implanted. And then, but I love my in-laws. Like Christian and Leanne are the best people in the world, but Christian like feels John's pain. And so anytime anything happened during my pregnancy, he immediately was like telling John. And I was like, could you not? Like, could we just like figure out what's going on first? So then John calls me and he's like, oh my God, babe, like, is everything okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm okay, but I do have something to tell you. We're having twins. And John says, we have to buy a fucking minivan. That's what he said. That was his response to we're having twins. And I am driving. I bought that minivan. Fast forward several months and multiple preterm labors, and the poor air conditioning guy who literally locked the house up for me because I went into, I was like contracting, and he was like, "You go, I got this." He's like locking up the house while I'm like driving myself to the hospital.
Because John was gone at this point.
Yeah, so John deployed when the girl, I was what, 4 months pregnant, I think.
I remember.
And I remember walking him off the ship, and I was like sobbing. And this woman, it was like this mom who was like my age now. It's like walking her 17-year-old son up the gangplank, and she sees this pregnant woman walking off crying, and she's just like burst into tears. It's like hugging her son, who's like, "Mom, please." But so he's gone. Like we communicated a few times, and I had several like preterm it's not technically preterm labor because my cervix wasn't dilating, but I was contracting enough that they had to do something to stop it. And of course, like God love Christian, but he's like telling John all this, and so he's wigging out, and everyone's very concerned. I felt great. That was the worst part, is I had all sorts of complications, but I felt great. Like I didn't have any nausea, I didn't have any vomiting, but my liver reacted real poorly to being pregnant. I had intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy, so I had to take special medicine so I didn't have jaundice and send my kid into stillbirth or kids into stillbirth. I had preeclampsia. I had all the things.
You had all the things.
I went on bed rest, and that's the day I was like, oh, I don't have to work today. I'm going to go buy a minivan. My water broke that night. Yeah. That minivan is exactly one day older than my children.
Around the car lot by yourself in what, probably 90-degree heat.
Yeah, it was June in Virginia.
In Virginia.
The part that made me the most mad is I had financing in place, and they wouldn't take it because John wasn't there, and they wouldn't accept my power of attorney. So thank God I had good enough credit to get that van on my. That's the only thing in our marriage I own all by myself, is that minivan. And then I remember, I babysat Hannah and Charlotte that night, my nieces, and I went home. My sister-in-law was like, "Okay, you go get some rest." And I was like fluffing a pillow after I had got up to go pee at 1 o'clock in the morning, and my water broke. And I called her. I was like, "Leanne, my water just broke." And she was like, "Oh my God, I'll be right there." I was like, oh, slow your roll. I need to put makeup on. Like, we're not going to the hospital looking all fresh faced. And so we got there, and I'm sitting in the waiting room, and I'm like, I'm uncomfortable, but I'm not like contracting regularly. And she was better than John ever would have been. God love him. He's wonderful. I'm sure he would have been great. But she was just like up at she was like, "This woman is in labor. She has high risk, and she has twins. You need to get her back." And they're like, "Ma'am, please sit down." And so then we finally get back, and they're like, "Well, we need to check to make sure it's amniotic fluid. Sometimes you pregnant women think you peed yourself." And Leanne was just like beside herself. She's like,
"What do you mean, you pregnant women?
Nurse practitioner." And of course it was amniotic fluid. And so they took me back, and we got a couple hours of sleep. And then all of a sudden I got an epidural. I was like, literally like, that guy, he's a winner, the epidural, the CRNA. But then all of a sudden at like 8 o'clock, they come rushing in. They're like, "There's something wrong with your baby." And I was like, "What?"
Oh my gosh.
And they look and they're like, "Oh, her head's almost out. That's the problem." And I can't feel anything. And it was shift change, so I could get it. But so I get rushed back to the operating room, because when you're having twins, at any point you have to be ready to do a C-section. And Blair, my first twin, she was head down, so they let me deliver vaginally, even though Sloan was breech. And so Blair, it was like 2 sneezes and a cough, and she came out. That was fine. And then Sloan, of course, had to be high maintenance, and she was feet first. And the minute Blair was out, Sloan did the splits. And so I have a resident delivering me, and he starts panicking, and I hear him say, sir, I can't get the other leg. I can't get the other leg." And for those of you who aren't medical, when you have a baby, your cervix dilates to about this big, but after the baby comes out, or after a certain amount of time and your hormones change, it starts to shrink. So the risk is, if you don't get the babies out in time, you could essentially strangulate one that's not doing what it's supposed to do. Yeah. So he's panicking. And then, so this high risk doctor there was only 3 high risk doctors at that hospital. I'd seen all of them at one point or another. He just goes in, and they both have their hands up inside me trying to grab Sloane's leg, who is of course kicking left and right, doing what, and I can see fists hitting the inside of my
Oh my
body,
gosh.
and I see Leanne and her eyes are like this. I'm just like, please don't pass out. Please don't pass out. Because she's like holding my leg. And so they finally
Yeah.
get it. They yank Sloan out. And so then they're there and we go and visit them and we do all the things in the NICU. But then longer story, even longer, but now trying to make it short. My husband was deployed for the first 4 months of my kids' lives. My mom was wonderful and came and stayed with me for a couple of weeks. And then I have an aunt that lovingly came and stayed with me for a week. And at that point, I was just ready to try it on my own. And my mom was wonderful, and came and took my dog, who I ended up, recently had to put down this year after 15 years. Wonderful family
No.
pet, but was a bit much for one woman to handle two newborn twins. Um, and a dog. I had to go back. I was really determined to nurse my kids. And so I would nurse them for 5 minutes, then formula feed. And then we got about 2 weeks out and I was like, we're not doing this anymore. If you're hungry, you'll eat. And so I did that. I took some weird online breastfeeding class where some woman brought her boob out and was like showing us how to, it was intense, but I made it to a year. I did the first 4 months by myself, and then my husband got back, and I gave him I think 3 nights, and I said, "Okay, your turn for the monitor. I'm sleeping in the guest room for one night." So, but
I just remember I came and visited you. Let's see, they were born in June. I got married in September. So I probably came and visited you in like maybe like July,
yeah,
August-ish.
yeah.
It was like
I have the
about like
picture of you sitting on the floor holding one of them, leaning against the couch.
yeah. And I didn't come visit right away because they were in the NICU when
Yeah,
obviously they were special needs when they came home, just a lot of stuff going on. So I waited a
yeah.
little bit to come visit you until you were more comfortable and they were able to see people a little bit more. But I just remember I was sitting next to you one night and we were watching Top Chef. I don't remember what we were watching. We were watching something and you were feeding the girls and you were literally just like whipping them around like pizza pies. Like you were dual feeding and you were just like, like flinging them around. I'm like, and that says I hadn't even got married yet and I hadn't have a lot of experience with kids yet. And I was like, what is happening? Are you okay? Like, I feel like you're gonna hurt them. Is this okay? And you're like, it's fine. So at that point, you'd been
I
doing it for a couple months.
I think my favorite story though, I think it was before John got home. I'm pretty sure he might have been on duty. I don't remember, but it was when the Game of Thrones was like coming, like getting all revved up, and I
Hmm.
remember watching it one night, and I had like the bassinet that was a twin bassinet next to my bed, and Blair started squalling, which is really unusual for her. So I picked her up and I was holding her, and I'm watching Game of Thrones. So I hold her, and I realized I'm like squeezing my baby too tight. And so
You're
I had a
suffocating her.
I had a boppy on the bed, and so I put her on the boppy, and she had settled down, and she was fine, like sitting next to me, she was fine. But I got so into the movie that when it was over, I remember being like, whew, whew. And so I turned on the light, and I look over, and there was only one baby in the bassinet. I was like, Jesus Christ, I have two babies. Where's the other one? What did I do with
Where the
her?
hell did she go?
And then I obviously she was like right there, and she was fine. But
That's just mom brain, like sleep deprivation to the max.
oh, that and the time when mom was there those first 2 weeks, and we could both see it about to happen. Conrad jumped into the bassinet with the baby, and everyone was like, "Ah!" And even Conrad was like, I don't know what I did. But yeah, but Blair was in the hospital for 4 months or for 4 weeks, and she had like a congenital, like just being premature. Her heart rate would drop when she would sleep really hard. She sleeps harder than Sloan to this day, and so she had to stay a lot longer. And then Sloan came home the minute she hit 5 pounds. They're like, take this baby home.
Hmm.
That was the hardest, I think, is having one at home and one still in the hospital, because I had to divide my attention. Like I could take
Yeah.
Sloan with me, but then I couldn't focus on Blair in the hospital. Um, and I remember that was really hard. And when I wanted to take Blair home, I was like, I'll take her home on a monitor. I don't care. I'll do it. And she failed her car seat test, and so she had to stay. And finally, I was like, I don't care. I'm taking my baby home at 4 weeks. And then I put her on a monitor, and she was on a monitor for like a the first night we are home. I took a shower and it went off, and I literally remember flying out of the shower covered in soap down the hallway because we didn't have a ensuite.
I just picture you, like, naked and covered in soap, like,
Yes, that's exactly how it was. Like, literally,
new
I had to
mom
clean.
body, like, "Wah!"
And then all she had done is kicked off the monitor, and I was just like, "Jesus Christ, it's gonna be a long haul." That and then, something else that happened. Oh, they did a spinal tap on Blair without consent. That was fun.
Oh, I remember that, you called me. We were actually in the hospital for, um, Chris's sister's second born,
Mhm.
um, when you called me and you were so upset.
Well, they had called my husband who's deployed in the middle of the Mediterranean, and they didn't try the second number on the list to get a hold of me. And thank God for nurses, because the nurse who was taking care of the girls called me and she's like, "Elise, this is Kathy. They did a spinal tap on your baby and no one was here to hold her. So I've been holding her for the last hour. Can you come in?" And I was like, "Kathy, ah!" Like, the director of the NICU came and apologized to me. Like, it was because, like, I I don't, retrospectively knowing what was wrong with her, I say, "Oh, I would never have consented to that." Like, in the moment I may have, but like I would have really liked the option, right?
Yeah.
And like, don't get me wrong, like for life-saving measures, like absolutely take care of my baby, but like a little bit of blood in her poop doesn't constitute needing to do a spinal tap.
No, and not only, like, whether you would have consented to it or not, it's the fact that it was done and you weren't there to comfort her, like, she
Exactly.
doesn't remember it, but you do,
I
and
do. Yeah.
I remember how devastated you were that you felt like a bad mom because you weren't there. She was in the hospital alone when that happened, you weren't there with her.
Yeah. But let's
Well,
talk
cool.
about Miss Nana.
Yeah,
Nana.
so
What, that's her
oh,
name?
no,
Oh,
no.
Nana, that's her name.
So
She's Nana
Nora
because she couldn't say Nora, so she called herself Nana.
yes, she's the little Nana bean. So she's my firstborn, and similar to you, Chris and I got pregnant very quickly, which I is not lost on me how lucky we are because we've had lots of
Us too.
our friends have struggled to get pregnant, and I know that's really hard for some people. So it was not lost on us how lucky we were that we got pregnant so quickly. But yeah, it was we started trying. And then within 3 weeks, we got a positive pregnancy test. It was actually the day after
Nailed
Christmas, and I
it.
remember, so it was the day after Christmas, and Chris was, uh he wasn't mad at me, but he was instantly he thought about all of the drinking we had done the past, like, 2 weeks and was very, like, anxious about it, and, like, "What happened? Like, you drank so much at Christmas." Not that I'm alcoholic, but, like, you have wine and
Yeah, it's Christmas.
it's Christmas,
Well,
and
we drink on our podcast. Come on.
it's true. His mom always gets us a wine advent calendar where it's like every night you're
I
having
have
like
benefited from that wine
a
advent
glass and a
calendar.
half of wine. So there's drinking happening. I mean, we're Catholic. What do you expect? But anyone who's had babies will tell you that the first 6 weeks don't really count. You can it's fine.
You can do whatever you want. Highly
Oh my gosh.
discourage meth, but
Yeah, don't do math. I mean, don't really ever do math. Like ever.
if
But
you like your teeth, don't do it.
yeah, no.
Or your
So yeah,
soul.
so got pregnant with her, similar to you, had very easy pregnancy, no nausea. And which I'm kind of interested if that's genetic because mom didn't have any nausea either when she was pregnant with us.
I
So
don't
I kind
know.
of wonder if that's something to do like genetically, if you're predisposition to that or not. But um, yeah, it got all the way up to 36 weeks and woke up in the middle of the night, went to pee and exploded everywhere. And my water broke. It was very like you see in the movies where it's kind of like a huge gush and then you're just like constantly leaking. So
That's what
called,
happens.
called the hospital, kind of putzed around. I showered, put makeup on, which in hindsight I'm like, why did you even bother putting makeup on? You're just gonna
Because we're
sweat
the
it all
same
off.
person.
It's true. Um Made our way to the hospital, no issues. But it was actually your birthday. So I
It
remember
was.
I called you at it's probably about 6 a.m. because we went. It was middle of the night when we went. And I remember calling you and saying, "Hope you don't mind sharing," because
And I said,
we're
that's the best birthday present I've ever been given. And it is true to this day.
yes,
It's so
not a
true.
bean.
My
But she was early, so she was 36 weeks, which is 4 weeks early. So a little bit early, but didn't uh she didn't have to stay in the NICU, which was great. So she came out and the doctor thought she was big enough, healthy enough, no issues. But um my actual delivery, so I got an epidural, which was great, but they and I don't know. I remember in my adult brain that there was something to do with I had to push a button to get
Oh, it's a
n
PCA. Yeah.
okay, I was like, "Am I making this up?" As I was like, "I don't
No,
wanna
it's a
be
thing. It's a
talking."
thing.
Okay, I was like, "I'm just completely making this up." So they didn't tell me I had to push the button to get, like, shots,
Uh-huh.
hits of the drug killer, so, like, it wore off. So, like, I'm actively pushing, and I'm like, I can feel everything. I'm like, this really hurts. And the nurse was like, oh, honey, some people just confuse the pressure for pain. It's okay. I'm like, this is not fucking pressure. This hurts. This is really, really bad. And they did kind of didn't believe me. And at one point, they were giving me oxygen. And at one point, they turned the oxygen off. And I'm so have no pain tolerance and I'm very melodramatic. So I'm sure it was like just Chris said they had to close the door because I was screaming so loud into the hallway.
And
So they
meanwhile,
had
I'm
to
like
close
high
the door.
fiving people. I'm like, yeah, epidural.
They had to close the door because I was screaming so loud. And this poor intern was delivering me because very similar to you. I'm like, everyone has to learn if as long as there's nothing like critically going wrong. Like I absolutely am perfectly fine having interns and
Hmm.
like people who are learning do it because they need to learn. And so I'm like, it's this like very mild mannered uh young guy, like very quiet, very like you
Probably
can tell he's
26 years old.
yeah, over his head, uncomfortable, and I'm, like, screaming in his face, and he's just like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And so they had been giving me oxygen, but at one point they turned the oxygen off, and I was, like, in between pushes, and I was like, "I need the oxygen," and the nurse was like, "There's no oxygen flowing, it doesn't work," and Chris was like, "Just give her the mask." And so they put the mask on me, there was no oxygen flowing, but I was like, with the mask.
Like a pilot.
It's just the placebo effect. But, finally got her out,
Did they ever tell you to push the button?
no, no, and they didn't believe me that they're like, "Oh, you're just confusing the pain for pressure the pressure for pain, like, it's working, da, 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 da." So we
Next time
finally
say, pain is subjective, ma'am, and I am feeling it. So do what you have to do.
well,
Is it 10
so
out of 10?
they 10 out of 10. I'm out of 10. They finally, so we get her out, she goes to be assessed, and like a couple minutes later or whatever go by and they're like, okay, we're gonna try and get you up to get you over to the bathroom to go to the bathroom. And I'm like, okay. And so I fling my legs over the side and stand up and start like hobbling, kind of walking over to the bathroom. And she's like, you should be able to do that with a epidural.
Epidural.
And I'm like, yeah, it's because it wasn't working. Like I
I told you
really
it hurt.
I can feel this. So yeah, pretty is a she didn't have to go to the NICU. It was pretty easy. Yeah, Luke was a little bit different, and he is a little bit different as a child. He is my feral child.
I love him.
So, he speaks in dinosaur growls half the time, I feel like. So, we got pregnant very quickly with Luke again, and because Nora was 4 weeks early, I was considered somewhat higher risk, so I had to go weekly for injections, and then as we got
Progesterone, yeah.
progesterone, yeah. And then as we progressed further, I had to go for ultrasounds. I think I was going weekly. Once I got past 20 weeks, I think I was going weekly.
You were going
So
often. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
yeah. Just to like make sure he's doing okay. And I remember I was let's see, it was probably I was like 22 weeks, 23 weeks maybe.
I remember this conversation
and I
exactly.
called you. We just chat like I just called you to chat. And we're chatting. I'm
Yeah.
like offhandedly just like didn't just was mentioning it because it was happening. I was like, "Man, I am so itchy all
And
the
my first
time."
question was, do you have a rash? And you said
Yes.
no.
No. But
Carry on.
I just assumed like your skin stretches, just like one of the another random because I remember being itchy with Nora. I'm like, whatever, it's just you're just itchy. And you're like, well, like where are you itchy? Is it like your belly because your belly's growing? Or is it, I'm like, no, it's my hands and my feet are itchy. I'm like sitting in bed at night, just like rubbing my feet
On the
on the
carpet?
on the carpet. Or the only relief I could get is if I stuck my hands and feet under ice cold running water, like in the bathtub. I would turn the bathtub on cold and stick them under there, and that would like
Sarna
give me
cream.
relief.
That's also a good reliever. But anyway.
And you're like, it's probably nothing, but you should go to your OBGYN and say, like, my sister, because you had it, right?
I had ICP. Yeah.
So they're like, just ask them about it. So essentially, what I had was cholestasis of pregnancy, which is what you had as well. And
Usually
what
the
that is,
liver reacts really poorly to having a baby.
yeah. So essentially, like my liver was shutting down, and the risk of that is the longer term your pregnancy goes, the higher the risk for stillbirth in the baby. And they don't understand why. They don't know why it happens. But I think if I remember correctly, if you go full term, the risk is upwards like over 5%, I think, of a stillbirth,
Something
which
like that, yeah.
is very high for a full term pregnancy.
Right.
And so the way they test that is a blood test. And so I had the blood test. They said, yeah, your bile levels, like, because
Mhm.
your liver wasn't processing bile correctly, um, were elevated. And they're like, let's give it another week. We'll test again and see where it is. And my levels had gone up even higher. And so at that point, they're like, okay, so started the regime of medication to try and bring under control. I started going for ultrasounds. I think I was going every 2 or 3 days at that point because they wanted to make
Yeah.
sure to monitor the baby's heart rate. And I had to like track like movement a lot more closely because
You had to
usually
sit
when
and
you,
count how many times they kicked and all that. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I just remember up to that point I'd had again a very easy pregnancy, very enjoyable pregnancy. um and I just remember being so anxious, like the second I didn't feel him moving I was convinced that he had died, which is very scary and traumatic.
Yeah.
And so I would go and start chugging juice. And so then Luke was like, "Wah!"
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I carried on, and I am very thankful because actually between talking to you and then one of Chris's co-residents in his prosthodontic program, his wife actually also had cholestasis, and I was able to call her and talk to her about it and her experience, and that helped me feel a bit better. But went 3 or 4 weeks with it, and they were like, okay, the farthest we're gonna let you go is I think it was 34 weeks. Do you remember
I want to
when
say
they would induce?
36, but
36. It might have been
yeah.
36. That they would induce me at 36 because they don't, the closer you get to full term pregnancy, the higher risk it is. So it's like, okay, fine, we have a plan. So it's Labor Day weekend, and I talked to my doctor. I'm like,
Ha ha
hey,
ha. Boom, boom. Sorry.
boom. I know. I went into labor. Little spoiler, into labor on Labor Day weekend. Uh, so I talked to my doctor, and my husband's family has a lake house in Michigan. I would really like to go very low key. I'm not gonna be on the boats or anything. I just want to go and like relax, get away for a little bit because I'm very stressed out with the health
All this.
complications. Yeah, and she's like, "Your scans look good. You're only going for a couple days. You wouldn't even have an ultrasound in between those times anyway." She's like, "Yeah, that's fine. I feel comfortable with you going." So pack up, throw Nora, who is 2 at this time, in the car, and we leave. We probably leave about like 7 o'clock p.m., 7 p.m. our time, because we wanted to drive when there wasn't traffic. So we get to the lake house. It's about 10:30, and I step out of the car and my water breaks. And this is like 2.5 hours away from home. So I'm like, oh no. So at first I'm like, maybe I just peed myself. So to your point, I'm like, maybe I was just pee. And so I kind of like freeze and like kind of like walk around to the other side of the car to where Chris is, and then another gush comes and I'm like, oh no, that's my water. So I'm like, my water just broke. So at that point I was
2.
31 weeks. No, I was 31 weeks. I
Oh,
turned
that's right, 'cause I
32.
forgot that kept you for a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was 31 weeks, so I was very, very early. We're in the middle of nowhere, Michigan. Like there's not a hospital, nowhere equipped to handle a baby that premature anywhere close.
Spoiler, some hospitals in Michigan don't even have doctors. So, anyway, carry on.
Anyway, so I like waddle inside. We like, thank God my in-laws were already there. We hand Nora off to them and I call my OB/GYN, wake her up, and I'm like, I'm in Michigan. I'm in like my water's just broken. And she's like literally on the computer Googling hospitals because she doesn't know the area.
Right.
And she's like, okay, Michigan City has a hospital if you can make that. So my husband and I jump back in the car and he's like, I think we can make it back to Chicago. And so he's trying to keep me calm and talking. And I didn't know the time, but he was driving like 110 miles an hour down
I
the
love
highway.
Chris so much.
I know, he's a
Heart
good
you,
guy.
Chris.
Yay, he's a good guy.
We'll keep
Um,
him.
he's trying to keep me calm and I'm timing my contractions and they're like 7 minutes apart, 6 minutes apart. I'm like, I'm terrified that not only, so my biggest fear of both these pregnancies before I even knew they were complications was having to give birth without medical assistance, without an epidural in the middle of nowhere, like on a straight on a highway. Like my worst fear is happening right now. I am going to give birth on this highway in the middle of nowhere with no help, no painkillers. And then not only that, like because the baby's so small, like there's a very real chance that he could die because he doesn't have immediate NICU like intervention.
Moving forward, if that happens, you call me if you have another baby, and I will walk you through NRP.
I appreciate that. No more babies for me though. I'm done.
Noted.
Uh
This was it.
and so Chicago is here. There's a for those of you who aren't Midwesterners. So Chicago's here. It sits on a lake that kind of dips down and around. And then we were on the other side of that lake, in Michigan. And so we had to go down around the tip of the lake, go into Indiana, and then back up into Illinois to get to Chicago. And so we get to basically the bottom portion. We're in Indiana, and we are passing by Michigan City, where there is a hospital. It's like right on the side of the highway. And my contractions, I said, like 6 minutes apart. I'm like, we're not going to make it. And Chris is like, I'll do what you want to do. If you want me to keep driving, I will. If you want me to pull over, I will. And I'm like, I'm scared. Please pull. I don't want to try and get there. Let's just pull over here and we'll figure it out. And so we pull in, excuse me, to the hospital in Michigan City. And I literally have I have jeans on and then a towel, like just like a normal like bathroom towel shoved between my legs. And it's funny. I remember when we were still at the lake house, I had soaked through my jeans and I was sitting on a towel trying like talking with my doctor before we got back in the car to leave. And Chris's dad was like, "Do you want to change your pants?" I'm like, "Doc, it's not gonna matter. I'm gonna soak right through those two. I'm just gonna leave these
Doc
ones
is a
on."
dentist. Let's be clear.
Yes, his dad. We
Sorry.
call him Doc. He is a dentist.
Not that that's wonderful. I'm just saying he was not like by any means a down there physician.
No, he's not. He was not an OBGYN. But it was just funny. He's like, "Do you want to change your pants? You do know that your pants are wet, right?
Wet.
It looks like you peed your
It
pants.
looks uncomfortable.
Looks like you're in jeans. It looks uncomfortable." So we get to the hospital. I like waddling in with this like towel underneath me because Chris goes to park the car and I'm like waddling into the emergency room. I'm like, I'm in labor. My water's broke. I'm 31 weeks. And the lady's like, go ahead and sit down. She's like, I'll have to call the doctor. They did not have a doctor in the hospital. They had to call a doctor to wake him up to have him come in. And so they get me admitted. They take me up to a room and I'm like hanging out for like 45 minutes in labor. They give me something to slow the labor down. I don't know what it was. You probably do more than I do because
They give you labor, or they give you something to develop the lungs. Was it an
no,
injection?
this was to slow the labor down, to slow my contractions down. So they gave me something like that and it slowed down a little bit. And they were like, well, the doctor is still like, essentially what happened was their hospital was not equipped to handle as early of a baby as Luke was going to be. And so the solution that ended up happening is they put me into an ambulance and then drove me to South Bend, Indiana. So the opposite direction. Because apparently ambulances cannot cross state lines. So even though it would have been closer to go from where I was to Chicago, back to my hospital where my OBGYN was, I couldn't do that because it crossed state lines. And so they had to drive me in the opposite direction to South Bend, Indiana,
I
which
would
is
love
where...
to research the law behind that. Rochelle, we need you to watch this episode.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if it was like a thing with the ambulance company that they don't do it or what the situation was, but they are like, you are free, absolutely free to leave and drive there if you want. But at that point, I was like, did not want to leave the presence of medical professional. So
You're a rational, reasonable person.
you know,
With your child's welfare and best interest in mind, I don't. What's wrong with you?
They put me on a stretcher and they load me up into an ambulance and they the hospital in South Bend sent 2 nurses over to the hospital I was at to be in the ambulance with me and like go with me and to admit me to the South Bend hospital, and they were lovely. Oh my gosh, they were just wonderful.
And that's the same hospital Emma had Ona at, right?
Probably. I would think so.
I feel like we had this conversation when Emma had Ona that like she had a very similar like wonderful experience once she got there.
Yeah, I'll tell you about the hospital here in a second because it's amazing there. It truly, I would not recommend someone having this experience, but we honestly the Lord put us where we needed to be. So, I'm in an ambulance. It's like 3 a.m. at this point, probably 2 a.m., 3 a.m. And we're taking the drive. And poor Chris is like white knuckling it in the car behind us. So he wasn't in the ambulance with me. He was driving our car behind the ambulance and following them. So he was like
Poor
driving.
guy.
He's like stressed out, doesn't know what's happening, exhausted. So we get to the hospital, get admitted, da 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 da. They pump me full of so I do 2 rounds of steroids. They were able to stop the labor for let's see, this was Friday and I delivered on Sunday, so a little
The
over.
steroids were to help Luke's lungs develop, though.
Yeah, so 2 rounds of steroids and then they gave me, I thought they said it was magnesium.
Yeah,
It
that's possible.
was it? Okay.
If your blood pressure is high, especially.
So they gave me what I remember them saying it was for was to help with like the neurological connections. I don't
Yep.
know if that was true. Okay. I was like, I was so like didn't know what was going on at this point, so I might be completely making things up and hallucinating, but they gave me magnesium. That made me so sick. Like I felt
Yeah.
like I had the flu. It was
And
bad.
your
But
muscles
literally
get wonky and
yeah, but literally as soon as they stopped the drip, like 20 minutes after they stopped it, I felt great.
mhm.
So, they got through all that and then they admitted me and then it was weird though cuz like my water had ruptured and so my belly was deflated and so there was nothing like to cushion him moving around and so it was really painful because I could every time he would like kick or move it was like there's no amniotic fluid there to cushion the blow.
Yeah.
So I was leaking in having contractions for better part of 2 days in the hospital and like just doing everything I could to like every time I would have a contraction I try to like relax my body and like slow it down and it almost got to the point where I could not control the contractions but like I would start to have one and I would like relax my muscles as much as I could and it would like ebb away kind of so
Mhm.
like kind of control them a little bit but
It's
similar
called progressive relaxation. It's a real thing, and you did amazing.
I didn't even know what I was doing it but so yeah so hung out for 2 days in kind of a limbo uncomfortableness of in labor obviously they at the point that you can't go home because you're at risk of an
Yeah.
infection. But I think when I first got there, before they had gotten the contractions kind of more under control, I was really uncomfortable and I was exhausted and I couldn't sleep because I was contracting every like 15 minutes. And they gave me something that I don't know what it was. Like, it's going to make you feel like you're really, really drunk, but you're not going to be spitty. You're not going
Probably
to be like,
Demerol.
it might have been. I have no idea. It
Yeah.
was intravenous. They gave it to me that. And literally, they gave it to me. About 5 seconds later, I was like, woo! And could still like, I still was having the contractions, but I just didn't care, kind of.
Yeah.
And so I was able to sleep from that, but, um, this is kinda gross, but pregnancy is gross. Giving birth is gross. I
It is a lot of things. It's amazing. It's phenomenal. Beautiful is not a word I would use to describe it.
no, it's nasty and nasty.
You
So
know.
I was really constipated, and on Sunday night at, like, 10 o'clock, I finally felt like I had to poop, and did end up having a bowel movement,
And
and that
a
sent me
baby.
and a baby! And that's what sent me into labor because I pooped. So I'm like I finally have a bowel movement, and then, like, after I'm done, I'm like, "Uh-oh. I'm still, this is not
So
stopping, this is speeding up."
John
And
keeps
I
telling me that we need to stop talking about poop in our episodes, by the way. What
No!
fun are you?
Never! So, yeah, so I go into full-blown, like, labor, I'm dilated, and I remember that they put me on a stretcher, and I was like, "I would like, an epidural, please. Please, God, for the love of God, give me an epidural." And they're literally running down the hallway with me because it was coming like, Luke was coming very quickly, and the one nurse on one side was screaming down the hall like, is the anesthesiologist, is that who gives the epidural?
Yeah. Or a CRNA. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, "Anesthesiologist, call the anesthesiologist now!" And one of the other nurses who happened to be one of the nurses that came in the ambulance with me was on shift with it, and she saw me being like very quickly wheel down, and she's like, "You're not delivering without me!" And like starts running after us.
That is why nurses will never go out of business, people, because we care.
That's right. So she followed us into the delivery room because she wanted to be there when he was delivered. Because, just they were all just very, very lovely. And she actually ended up coming up to, the NICU and visiting as well,
I
which was
love
really
that.
nice of
That was
her.
above and beyond.
Yeah, she was super, super nice. Um,
Thank your nurses, people.
but yeah, right? Oh my gosh, they're amazing. So yeah, the anesthesiologist gets in there very quickly and gives it to me, and it's literally like flipping a switch. It was
All of a sudden,
lovely.
she hears,
No, for real.
"Ah."
I could cry. I was like, you're my favorite person ever. I love you.
Told you
I'm
I'd give
like
my
laying
high
there,
fives.
I'm joking with people. I'm having a great time. And just that argument that people make of like, well, I don't want to be drugged up when I deliver. I want to be in the moment. Felt like, honestly, you don't feel, at least I didn't feel drugged up other than you couldn't feel your bottom half. But I'm like, I was able to be so much more in the moment and aware of what was going
Yeah.
on because I wasn't in unbearable pain than when I was with Nora. Like, I 100% epidural. Like, I think you were
Yeah.
more aware and like in the moment when you have it because you're not so focused on the pain.
To each their own. Like, and I know I have some mom friends who've had, 6 kids and they're like, "Oh, it just, I sneeze and it comes out and it's fine. It's not a big deal." And that's wonderful for you, but like as a first-time mom, having an epidural allowed me to be like much more present and like able to like hold I wasn't able to hold Blair, but I was able to hold Sloan when she came out and like acknowledge like, "Oh, that's why I did all this." Okay.
Yeah. I didn't want to have a mirror to see, but I did put my hand down and I felt Luke's hair when he was coming out. And he was so tiny when he was born. He was just over 4 pounds, I
I can
think.
tell you
Four
exactly what he was because he was the same weight as the girls. 4
four
pounds,
pounds,
3
2 ounces.
ounces.
3 ounces, like it's 4 pounds, 2 ounces. And they dip below that. He was under 4 pounds when they lose like a little bit of weight when they first are born. But yeah, I pushed him out in I think 3 or 4 pushes, and I made a joke. I was like, "Man, when they're this small, they're way easier to get out." From that perspective, I would recommend a preemie. They're great when you deliver. But,
Don't have 2.
yeah, no. One is good. But yeah, so he was obviously quite small. He struggled a lot with, Braxton Hicks. No, not Braxton Hicks. What is it
That's
called?
your contractions. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not Braxton Hicks. It's, Brady episodes?
Yeah, that's what Blair had. Like where his heart
Okay.
rate would drop. Yeah.
Yeah, so he would, stop breathing and his heart rate would drop, and you
Mhm.
kinda had to, like, stimulate
Stimulate
him
him.
to be like, "Hey, hey, wake up," and then he'd kind of come back to life, but, he was in the NICU for a little over a month, and the hospital that we were at so, for anyone who has never been in a NICU, typically how a NICU is, there's, more than one baby or one family in a room, and you essentially have, like, the incubator where the baby's at. It's like a warming table. Depending how new they are,
Because
you
babies
can
can't keep their own temperature, so you have to maintain it for them
exactly. And so some babies have to be enclosed, some babies can be open to the air. It just depends on how stable and how developed
for
they
how
are.
long they are. Yeah.
Exactly. But usually there's like the incubator and then maybe like a chair and then like a curtain you pull around your little area, and that's the privacy, and you can't stay overnight. You have to leave at the end of the night. So that's how most NICUs are. And that's how the NICU would have been if we had gotten back to the hospital where we delivered Nora at, where we originally were planning on delivering Luke. The hospital that we delivered at in South Bend is one of only two, I believe. This is what they told me, so I haven't confirmed this, in the country that actually allow the mom to room with the baby, which honestly makes zero sense to me that that's not standard practice because there's been so many studies that babies do best when they have like that skin to skin contact, they have their mom, they're being held. It's wild to me that that's not standard practice for
I don't
newborns.
think I was even allowed to hold the twins until they were 2 or 3 days old.
Yeah, it's
I
crazy
was
to me.
allowed to
So
touch them, but I wasn't allowed to hold them.
the head neonatologist at the hospital that we were at was a very like well respected, world renowned doctor, and he had decided that he wanted to raise his family in a small town, and so he decided to settle in South Bend, and that the NICU had just like maybe 3 or 4 years ago undergone a complete renovation, and it was his like brainchild, like sort of culmination of his life's work was this NICU that he had designed basically. And so every room was a very large room with the incubator and all the stuff you would need to like pump and like a sink and a fridge. And then attached to that was a little in suite where there was a bed and like a second TV and a closet you could store stuff in, a full bathroom with like a shower and everything. And so I was able to live in the room with him. And like I was able to, even though he was in NICU, I got up every 3 hours and I tried to breastfeed. Neither of my kids latched correctly. So I ended up pumping and bottle feeding for the first 3 months, and then my had a bad supply. So when I went to back to work, my supply fell off a cliff, and so I switched to formula fed. So very big proponent of fed is best. Does not matter what combination of
For
anything that you do,
sure.
whatever's works for you.
But
And
also for any moms listening to this, if breastfeeding is really important to you, there are breast milk banks, and
yeah,
so you could do that. But I want to say, like, when I visited you, Brianna, you would literally like walk around the apartment with your pump, and like
I know.
you're constantly pumping. You did absolutely everything you could.
I did. Pumping is awful. It's absolutely awful. But you do it as much as you can, and you
Everybody,
just
like you said, fed is best.
yes, you do your best. So, I was able to live with him for the whole time that he was there, which was great. And there was actually a Ronald McDonald House also attached to that
Mom stayed
hospital.
there.
My husband and my mom took shifts alternating, which bless them. I was only alone in the hospital maybe like 1 or 2 days the whole time. So like,
I have to say that my children had to find alternative health care because you decided to have a child. I'm just saying.
sorry.
No. And
Um,
so mom literally called me and she was like, "Your sister's in labor." I was like, "Yeah, I know." And she goes, "Well," I said, "Mom, baby Trump's vacation. Please go." And she was like, "Okay, thanks."
thanks.
So,
Yeah, my poor mom. That she because for Nora, they had just gotten back from your house. They literally
yeah.
got back at like ten
Literally
o'clock at night.
drove and then like didn't even stop and just kept going.
No, they got home. It was like 10 o'clock. They got home, went to sleep. I called them at 5 a.m. Was like, "Hey, I'm in labor," and they're like, "Okay," and got in the
But
car and drove up.
but
Chris was able to stay at Ron McDonald, and then he would leave to come back up because obviously we still had Nora. So Nora did shifts between his parents being home with him, and then mom at one stint would stay with me for 3 or 4 days, and then she would come up here for 3 or 4 days to help Chris. And poor Chris too. I remember it was maybe like the first week I was in the NICU with Luke, and he called me at like 3 a.m. and Nora had like 104-degree temperature, and he didn't know what to do. And so I actually handed the phone off to the nurse in the room. I was like, "Can you talk to my husband?" And she was walking him through like rotating
let's do Motrin
ibuprofen.
and let's do Tylenol and then we're gonna do this.
Yeah. So
Which
I was
actually,
like,
if you want the literature that actually technically we're supposed to tell you that the science does not prove that that helps, as a mother, I will tell you it helps. That is not my doctorate nurse education coming through. That's my mom real life.
yeah. So I was almost gave birth on the side of the road, stranded in a hospital a couple hours away from home for a month while my infant son learned how to breathe.
Breathe. I remember you. I don't remember if it was you that called me or mom that called me. It's like, well, your sister's at the cab or at the lake house. Her water broke, and then like just hearing the saga of, well, she got put. There's no doctor at the hospital, so they put her in an ambulance. Like, what the actual fuck?
I
Like, you're
It's
a
a good
you
story
can't.
now. Would not recommend. Good story now though.
It's like I would no, like don't call yourself a hospital if there's not a doctor available. Like
Yeah. Every time we drive past that hospital now on the way to Lake House, I'm always like, "Fuck you."
you suck.
Uh, it's all right. But
Do you have a
I
Band-Aid? No, I'm not surprised.
the hospital in South Bend, I cannot speak highly enough of. They were wonderful. The NICU there is amazing. Ron McDonald House is amazing.
I remember the first time Christian, because so my husband's a twin and he was deployed when my babies were born, but his twin brother was there intermittently. And the first time he came up, they had so many tubes and wires. I remember, and he has two babies. Like he held two babies in the hospital. And I remember him just like holding them and just being like, I don't know what I can touch. And
I
like
know.
I'm in healthcare. And so for me, it's much less intimidating, but it must have been so scary for so many people. And I'm sure Luke
Yeah.
was the same way. I'm sure he had, like, especially with the heart stuff, he had monitors, and every time something would start to ding, someone would come over and rub him. And
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because so in his room, they obviously always had him up to a monitor tracking his
Mhm.
oxygen and heart rate, that they turn the sound off because they don't want you listening to the sounds. Well, every time he would have a Brady episode, that it would click on, and I don't know if it was like clicking on because it was like recording how long
Mhm.
it was or what it was, but I could hear it. And I'd gotten to the point where I was in tune with it. If I was across the room and the room was quiet, I could hear it click on and I would know he's having an episode and I'd go over there and make sure he was okay. Well, we get finally come home with him. Going home day was such an exciting day. Got to bring him home, and for the first week, I would have these random panic attacks, and it wasn't tied to anything. I couldn't figure out what I would be sitting there. Obviously, you're anxious anyway with a baby that needs like special needs, but
Mhm.
and he's not special needs now. I just want to clarify, he's perfectly fine and
Had
crazy.
had extenuating medical circumstances when he
Yes,
came home.
yes. But I would just be like, he would be fine sleeping away next to me, and all of a sudden I would have like a very strong anxiety panic attack. I'm like, what is happening? And I finally figured out our thermostat, when the air or heat would kick on, it
Oh.
made that same clicking sound that his monitor would make in the hospital. And I was like subconsciously picking up on it, the clicking sound, and it would give me an anxiety, like adrenaline rush, the same way it would where I'm like, oh no, he's having like he's not breathing. Is he okay? What's his heart rate? And so it was funny because I was like subconsciously picking up on that because it
Yeah.
was the same kind of like very faint clicking sound when it would click on.
I remember Blair had that monitor when she came home, and when they took it off of her off of it, they're like, "She's fine. She's gonna be fine." But like being medical and a mom, I was like, "I'm just really not sure." So I bought those outlet monitors,
I
and
had one of those too.
I can't buy it for Blair and not Sloan. They're twins. Like, even though Sloan had no problems, I was like, I have to do it for both. And so, like, I did those for a little bit and they were great. Like, they gave me peace of mind, but like, she really was fine. And so, like, whenever I got an alarm, it was usually like they had kicked it off or something like that. That was the best investment I ever made because it gave me peace of mind for 3 or 4 months. And then I was able to literally sell it for about like $20 less than I bought it for on eBay
Yeah.
because they're so expensive that any savings is savings.
Yeah,
So,
they're great. Although I will say, so the version we had was a pulse ox. So it had the pulse, but it also would do like an oxygen reading.
ours too, yeah.
They don't do that anymore. I guess they got sued because it's not like medical grade equipment. So it's
Yeah, I believe that.
only I think they still have the heart rate, but they don't do the oxygen. I'm like, honestly, that was the part that I like the best. Like, well, I understand like it's not foolproof, but it would give me like a ballpark of like, okay, the oxygen's a little low. Like, should we be concerned? Especially like when
Yeah.
Luke was out of the immediate danger zone, but like would get a cold, and were worried because he was such a little preemie
Mhm.
that we would put that sock back on him and just give me peace of mind. But oh my gosh, I recently found his preemie socks. So it's like the size below preemie. They're like this big.
The
They're
outfits
so
the girls first wore
cute.
in the NICU are too small for some of their baby dolls.
Yeah,
Like, I
they're
saved some of them, they
tiny.
play with them, and it's, like, ridiculous.
And
I'm just like,
he
"You
was
literally."
swimming in them. Like when we first put him in those clothes, like they were huge on him. He literally like it was so tiny. Well,
But,
we are
like,
at an hour and 40 minets. So I'm
you
gonna
have
have
a
some
lot of
editing to do.
editing to do.
I think it just be allowing us, but I think they're good stories, and I think they're important stories. I'm
I think
done with having babies, so they're my only stories.
I think too, like we said in the beginning, it's and not that men can't relate to this and, like, appreciate that what women go through, but, like, it's one of the, like, the most tribal and visceral, uh ways that women are able to connect to each other because many of us have gone through such it's literally the most harrowing experience your body will go through. These stories are what make us human, what make us mothers, what make us women, and what keeps our generations alive and going. And we learn from them, and um, we relate to each other on a level that other people can't.
Hmm. Yeah,
I think
they're
that's
unique to
really
you and
important.
a badge of honor. It's part of your story, so I absolutely
Yeah.
agree.
I think too, I mean, I feel like I've accomplished a lot of things professionally in my life, but the thing I'm the most proud of is my kids. And
Absolutely.
a lot of my that pride comes from how much of that I did. And like not that John's not wonderful, not that he's not like a phenomenal like spouse, like provider. He is absolutely a caregiver when I can't be here, but like there are some things that like I only can own and I think that's really
Hmm.
powerful.
Yeah, 100%. All right, well, let's wrap this up. So, real quick before we say goodbye, we are on social media, so make sure you go and follow us. rate, review, and subscribe this episode on whatever you are listening to our podcast, because it really helps us get in front of other people and continue to grow our listeners. And it's really exciting when we see we have another download or another
And I would love
location
to
has
be
listened.
independently wealthy. So if you could help me accomplish that, that would be wonderful.
I don't know that this podcast is going to do that for you, but it is fun to interact. And we'd love to hear from anybody who's listening, even if it's just like, hey, listen to the episode, it was good. Just it's fun. I don't know. So reach
It is
out
fun.
and
If
leave a
nothing
comment,
else,
leave a
I got to
like.
chat with my sister for an hour and a half. So
That's right. Exactly. And if this gets to one person who's maybe pregnant and is worried or just had a baby and feels alone, I think that's worth it, because
yeah,
I remember there were random like YouTube or podcasts that I found when I felt very alone post post delivery, postpartum or whatever, and they were a lifeline for me. And so if that could be this to someone else, I would be so happy. So
I just took a
um
lot of naps.
that works too. So we are on Instagram, Chit-Chat Cheers Podcast. Our TikTok handle is Chit-Chat Cheers. And we are on YouTube at Chit-Chat Cheers Podcast. So I probably should have made those all the same now that I'm looking at that, but here we are. And so yeah, so follow us on social media. Again, give us a like, a rate, review, subscribe. That would be great. We will be back in a couple of weeks with our next episode. TBD on the topic yet. We haven't decided, but although it's going to be it's December 3rd now, so it's going to be close to Christmas. So I think maybe a Christmassy theme. What do you think?
I am loving that.
Yeah, so
Ooh,
we'll have to think about that.
Bad Mom's Christmas themed podcast. My favorite Christmas movie.
You'll finally get me to watch it.
I will. Maybe
Okay.
that's what we'll do. We'll watch it together.
Oh, there you go. There you go. So we will see you guys in a couple of weeks, but until then, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you later. Bye.
Bye.